Hi everyone, friends! Unfortunately, each of us faces various illnesses. Some with serious ones, some with not so serious. When a person gets sick, in many cases they go to the doctor and receive instructions on how to tackle the problem. Treatment is prescribed based on the accumulated knowledge of humanity, which is described in various textbooks. So, for every disease, there is already some sort of recipe for how to fight it. Since 1948, the main, so to speak, trendsetter in medicine, the one who sets the tone, determines approaches to treatment. It provides characteristics of diseases and so on, and that is the World Health Organization, which is a specialized agency of the UN. And its members, meaning those who collaborate with WHO, are the same countries that are part of the United Nations. So basically, it's all the countries in the world. To put it even more simply, the main doctor on the planet is the World Health Organization. So overall, that's what it does. Providing international health recommendations. Establishing health standards. Collaboration with governments of countries to strengthen national health programs. The development and transfer of relevant technologies, information, and health standards. So, how you are treated or not treated is ultimately determined by this organization. It even determines whether you are sick or not. Yes, there are also controversial issues here. Well, for example, until 1990, the WHO considered homosexuality a mental disorder. So, until 1990, such people were considered sick. After 1990, they all became healthy. Together, well, now hold on tight. The latest revision of the International Statistical Classification of Diseases by WHO was in 2019. Here, the WHO excluded the desire to change one's gender from mental disorders. So, if you were born a man and want to... Becoming a woman was previously considered a mental disorder anomaly, but after 2019, it suddenly became the norm. Pedophilia is still considered a deviation, but steps have already been taken to declare it a norm. They seriously explain that the desire to abuse children is just a sexual desire, and the person is normal, but they have such desires. That's it. You might ask how this relates to us, and I'll remind you that the whole world is part of this organization, including Russia. And for example, here's the news from 2021. Russia plans to complete the transition to the new revision of the International Classification of Diseases, ICD-11, in 4 years, the Ministry of Health told Izvestia. ICD-11. Which will officially come into effect on January 1st, 2022. It allows for better planning of disease treatment and diagnosis, specialists believe. So, what was said about transgender people and pedophiles, Russia has agreed to implement it. A deadline was even set for 2025. So, in the case of implementing this WHO classification in Russia, if for example your child wanted to change their gender, that would be considered normal. And pedophiles would start to be protected from criminal prosecution. Well, it's just that the person is normal, but they have these kinds of sexual desires. But let me reassure you, with the start of the special military operation, Russia began to reject Western influence, including in the field of medicine. And in the end, Russia completely rejected these WHO innovations just recently. Well, nevertheless, at least we, so to speak. We have stepped away from ICD-11. Russia is living by ICD-10, which was also developed by the WHO. And here I suggest we take a closer look at the world's chief doctor, the World Health Organization. What is this all about? It turns out there's a lot of interesting stuff hidden here. In general, let's take a look behind the scenes of world medicine and see what's going on there. So, the WHO, as mentioned, is a specialized agency of the United Nations, made up of 194 member states. The main function of the organization is to address international public health issues for the people of the Earth. It was founded in 1948, with its headquarters in Geneva. In Switzerland, in general, the WHO is the main global institution dealing with the health of the world's population. The goals of the WHO are certainly noble. It's about fighting diseases and improving human health as a whole. There are many facts related to this organization that make you think about whether the WHO is actually doing what is stated in their charter. Let's go through the facts. As mentioned, the WHO was established in 1948. And interestingly, this organization was created with the help of the foundation of American oligarch Rockefeller, based on the International Health Division, which was again established by the Rockefeller Foundation.
What do Americans have to teach us? They play the long game. They play the long game. This is when the war ended. Now I'm going to show you the war has ended. This is what Nikita Sergeyevich said. We were only performing, but Dulles Brothers, CIA Director and Secretary of State, initiated today's issues. They created the World Health Organization, the International Health Organization, with full backing from Rockefeller's financial support. Look, first of all, they created the World Health Organization, the International Health Organization, They didn't create it to treat people, but to take control of the world's health and influence it through vaccination. Anything you want? And look, this organization was created with money from Rockefeller. Rockefeller, his close associate and friend, Chiz Holm, became the first president of the World Health Organization in 1948. Here's his quote. "To achieve a world government, it is necessary to expel individuality from people's minds. Attachment to family traditions, national patriotism and religious dogmas, the destruction of the concepts of truth and falsehood, which are the foundation of a child's upbringing, the replacement of faith in the experience of elders, as Nikita mentioned, with rational thinking. These are the delayed goals needed to change human behavior." This is a memorandum since 1948.
So in this regard, I think it won't come as a surprise to you that the USSR left the World Health Organization the very next year.
In 1949,
The Soviet Union returned to this organization, none other than Nikita Khrushchev after Stalin's death. By the way, the WHO, as you know, is a branch of the United Nations. Again, as you know, the headquarters of the UN is located in the USA. This headquarters was also built with the help of Rockefeller, who donated the land for its construction. Why is that? Why did he need that? It's quite simple because, according to the Americans' plan, the original goal of creating the UN was to turn it into some sort of world government. According to the plan of the Western oligarchs, decisions in the United Nations were supposed to be made by a simple majority. And as you know, the majority has always been on the side of the West. Even in the UN Security Council, there are 5 main countries, 3 of which are Western countries. These are the USA, the UK, and France. So, obviously, all decisions would be made in favor of the USA. But Stalin insisted on the veto power. So, the situation is that when one country out of 5 disagrees, the decision is not made. So, the oligarchs' plans actually didn't work out with the United States. But nevertheless, this explains the actions of the Western oligarchs in pouring money into the UN. As we know, pharmacology is a very profitable business. Everyone gets sick and dies. And practically every one of us takes some kind of pills and medications. And those who produce them will clearly make a lot of money. The revenue of the largest pharmaceutical companies amounts to tens of billions of dollars a year. So, the Rockefeller Foundation understood this a long time ago and got involved in medicine. But other people understood this as well. And let's just take a look at who is funding the World Health Organization today. This is the official WHO website. According to the data published on the official WHO website, the share of contributions from member countries is currently quite modest. Only 17 to 28% of the organization's total budget. The remaining funds that the WHO uses for its projects come from voluntary donations. Here are the ones who contribute. The United States, the United Kingdom, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Melinda Gates is Bill Gates' wife. The Vaccine Alliance, created with the participation of Bill Gates and other various funds and pharmaceutical companies. Well, I really believe that healthcare at such an international level should be handled exclusively by the state, so there's no temptation to profit from the health of citizens. The world's health institution is funded by American oligarchs and pharmaceutical companies that produce vaccines. Just think about it. An organization that determines which medications should be taken is funded by the company that produces those medications. And this is all public information, proudly shared on the official WHO website. Just imagine if it were found out that, for example, a tender for the construction of some facility was awarded to a businessman who sent a government official several million rubles or dollars. Well, this is a total scandal, corruption, a criminal case. Yes, on a global scale, in the case of the main health organization, this is absolutely normal. In fact, this is nothing more than legalized corruption. And it's not just corruption, this concerns the health of citizens all over the world. This raises a logical question. In whose interest does this organization act? In the interests of the people or the interests of the sponsors? Well, there's a saying that everyone knows, he who pays the piper calls the tune. There's an interesting case that confirms these words, that happened in 2009. Last year, there was an outbreak of swine flu, after which the World Health Organization declared a pandemic, and the governments of many countries began to purchase flu medications in bulk, and the medications were produced by companies like Rashi, Holding, and Relensa, as well as GlaxoSmithKline. Only the drug Amiflu was purchased by 85 countries for a total of nearly $18 billion, and in Russia, 4 billion rubles were spent on vaccine purchases. The stockpile mostly turned out to be unused. In the same year, 2009, the WHO strongly recommended mass immunization of the population against swine flu. Thanks to the fact that most countries listened to the organization's recommendations, vaccines were purchased. The profits of pharmaceutical companies in Europe alone reached 7 billion euros. And that's when suspicions arose that the WHO had entered into a direct collusion with vaccine manufacturers, particularly Roche Holding, exaggerating the scale of the pandemic threat, without revealing the real information. By the way, After that, many countries had to simply destroy unnecessary stockpiles of medicines and vaccines due to their expiration dates. So in reality, there was no pandemic at all. Even in the Council of Europe, this event was called the medical scam of the century.
And in Europe, a major scandal is unfolding. The collusion among pharmaceutical companies was talked about as early as the first days of the swine flu spreading across the globe. It seems to be confirmed. Some experts from the World Health Organization who declared the pandemic were receiving money from pharmaceutical companies. Dmitry Sedov has the details. Meanwhile, a loud scandal has erupted in Europe. Danish journalists found out that experts from the World Health Organization, they were receiving money from pharmaceutical giants, the very same ones that, due to the panic that arose worldwide, the panic led to an outrageous profit from antiviral drugs. According to some reports, it could amount to at least $7 billion. The new flu virus has given rise to a new type of scam, claims the Danish press. Because it was under the pressure of such paid specialists that the flu pandemic was declared.
There would be a lot fewer questions if the WHO were funded solely by the government. But when an organization that is supposed to announce whether or not to take medications is funded by private pharmaceutical manufacturers, thinking people won't trust this organization. And here's another wonderful example that makes you think. The coronavirus of today. Well, as we know, many people around the world have really suffered from it. But you know how it spread all over the planet? It's simple. On January 30th, 2019, recognizing the outbreak of the coronavirus infection as an emergency, the WHO recommended not to interrupt transportation between countries. So the organization didn't just allow it, it recommended spreading the virus all over the world. By the way, in this regard, at that time, President Trump of the United States refused to fund this organization. Because thanks to its calls, the United States became the #1 country in terms of coronavirus cases. The WHO only declared the coronavirus infection a pandemic on March 11th, when the disease had already been identified in 115 countries around the world. The world has faced epidemics before, and the most effective way to fight them is simple quarantine. That needed to be implemented, but the WHO recommended not to do that. Well, in my opinion, it's because the Western elite had plans for this pandemic. Do you know how much vaccine manufacturers made? Tens of billions of dollars? A quarantine would have been needed for just 3 weeks, maybe a month, to defeat the epidemic. Many years of experience speaks for this. There are even specific examples in history. Just imagine if the WHO had recommended closing the borders so that no one traveled to and from China for 3 weeks. And that's it. Nothing would have happened in the world and everyone would have lived peacefully. But apparently someone didn't want humanity to get rid of it quickly. Isn't it those companies that made billions of dollars? Those companies that fund the WHO? And here again, there's an interesting point. The previously mentioned Rockefeller Foundation in 2010 predicted the coronavirus pandemic. Everything is described accurately. In its report, so to speak, it predicted the coronavirus pandemic. There, surprisingly, everything is described accurately. Even about China, that it would implement quarantine for all its citizens and stop the virus in its country faster than anyone else. Striking similarity. And here's another fact. In 2019, that very Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that fund those organizations conducted pandemic exercises as if preparing for events that would happen just a year later. Given all this, it becomes obvious why the United States, in violation of international law, has created over 200 military biolabs around the world. What are these biolabs working on? Well, most likely they are creating biological weapons. In 2015, Americans were already bragging that they had managed to create a coronavirus. These are all real proven facts. There's not a drop of conspiracy theory. I'm just listing what is available in the public domain. Another amazing fact. Russia was the first country to develop a vaccine for the coronavirus. Sputnik V. But the WHO was in no hurry to save humanity and distribute this vaccine. No, this organization was waiting for the creation of Western vaccines, and only then did they announce the need for vaccination. Unexpectedly, vaccines from companies like Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson were approved. The thing is, caring for people's health is far from being a priority for this organization. The main thing is making money, and that's not to mention the global deception in medicine. Here, of course, some will disagree with me. But I consider world medicine, with some exceptions, such as surgery, to be symptomatic, that is, treating only symptoms. Modern medical standards are not interested in a person being truly healthy. After all, who would then buy medications from Western pharmaceutical companies and enrich their owners? No one is making people healthy. He goes to the doctor, and the doctor at best addresses the symptoms according to the guidelines and sends him home until the next symptom of the illness appears. But the illness remains incurable. In this regard, a complete overhaul in the healthcare sector is needed. We shouldn't be treating a person for their whole life, draining them of money, but rather helping them to heal. How so? The topic is very large and complex and undoubtedly important. Of course, you can say that the main thing is nutrition and sports, but without revealing the nuances, nothing will happen, obviously. Maybe I'll break it down. sometime. But for now, friends, that's the situation.